Guten Tags. О налогах человеческим языком.
Good afternoon. You are listening Guten Tags, a weekly informational and analytical podcast. Today me, Yaroslav Kazakov, managing partner of the Taxadvisor law firm Alexandra Aлекссева and partner of the Taxadvisor law firm Алексей Яковлев, talking with the world-famous tax specialists from Italy, Паскуале Пистоне. Hello, Mr. Паскуале.
Здравствуйте, я Паскуале Пистоне. Эта пандемия – беспрецедентный момент в новейшей истории человечества. Это как война, которая убивает и заставляет страдать многих людей по всему миру. У всех нас есть общий враг, и мы должны объединиться для борьбы с ней в духе взаимной солидарности. Италия особенно пострадала от COVID-19. Конкретно помочь русского народа врачами, лекарствами и защитными масками, спасая человеческие жизни в Италии. Я хотел бы выразить свою личную благодарность российскому народу за эту конкретную помощь и солидарность с моей страной и народом в этот очень трудный момент.
Thank you very much, Pasquale. Actually, yes, there is no question we should help together. And actually, yes, we're following the terrible news. The whole country is following. I think the whole world. And I believe that you are really getting to the normal point, to the end of the epidemic peak, and gonna to be getting better. And now I would like to hand over the microphone to my colleague, Yaroslav, who is always our host.
Guten Tags.
How do you cope with the quarantine? What turned out to be the most difficult thing in isolation? Can you give us a couple advice of making the best of this awful situation, if it is possible?
Thanks very much, Yaroslav. Quarantine really changes your life and your way of behaving and actually your way of working. You have to completely do a reset. And it can give you opportunities from a working perspective, but psychologically it can be a little bit more difficult to handle. So every day looks pretty much the same. There is no Monday, no Sunday, no Saturday. All the days look the same. And when you wake up, you know that you will not be leaving home. And we are in the lockdown right now, so it's quite strict because we are not allowed to go to the streets. So, it's just trying to get used to the idea that you are, going to be in the same place and you do not know for how much longer. However, there is the positive and the negative side of that. So keeping yourself busy and trying to have a regular rhythm of life helps day after day to see that, the day will soon come that you will be allowed to be free again. That's pretty much how I've been living it for the past 3 weeks.
We've already experienced this one working day starting from the start of quarantine, and there is no end so far, but nonetheless, we hope everything's getting better. And by the way, do you try to divide your day by working hours and not working hours, trying to hold to some regime or?
Yes. I must say, the day, it's pretty much standard. So it's, I try to have lunch and dinner just to sort of make the point and actually have them with my family, which I normally don't have because I travel most of the time. In a week, as you know, I can be flying taking 6-7 flights per week or planes per week. So it's a completely different situation. I do have a sort of regular routine. So I start working fairly early in the morning, normally at 8:30, and then I have my lunch and dinner. And before dinner, I have my, I spend some time on the treadmill just to keep fit. And apart from that, is just working all the time. And some of the time I spend teaching at distance, some of the time addressing issues at IBFD, and other part of the time I do some research. So there are less emails going around, and everybody seems to be more concentrated. But this is pretty much, Alexandra, how I spend my days.
Let's go to another question. And how serious the situation is in your region? What measures have been implemented?
Well, Yaroslav, when you say region, the point is that Italy is a small country and Russia is a big one. So when you say region, Italian regions are very small, but the country as such is in a very bad situation. And we are, I think we've been having 12 or 13,000 people dying, so that's very bad, just of coronavirus. In my own region where I live, the situation is not as bad, but, as compared to the rest of Italy, but still, we do have several persons. The measures that have been implemented 3 weeks ago, we've been put under strict lockdown. So basically, if you go in the streets, you can be fined to up to 2,000 euros. And everyone knows that we are fighting against an invisible enemy. We do not know where it can be. And, the only way right now is isolation. So we are basically cutting down all social contacts. And we see each other on the phone, mobile phone, as if someone were on the moon. But, that's pretty much it.
And do people abide by these measures?
Some do, some don't. Most, I should say, do. But, some people haven't really understood how serious this is. So sometimes they are trying to find some reasons to go out. There are only very limited reasons to go out. One is to do food shopping, and the other one is going to the hospital and going to the pharmacy. But some people are saying that they get out of home several times. Once they buy milk, another time they buy bread or other things. But I should say that most of the people abide by the rules. And that's quite unusual because it's really as if they were a curfew. So, you don't hear cars in the streets. Unfortunately, you hear ambulances. You hear the birds outside, and you just don't hear anyone, as if it were a sort of city with no inhabitants.
The same actually is the same mode is switching on here because there is now a discussion in Russia, especially in Moscow, discussion of what is equivalent measure, what is equal to the situation that's going on is right now, because more or less tough measures were taken after the last weekend in Moscow when almost 50% of the people showed reckless behavior. They were gathering socially together, making barbecue in the parks, and so on. And now what we have a lot of new legislative acts introduced, setting up fines and penalties on those who are going to break restrictions or on those who expose other people to the threat of coronavirus. What do you think? How actually it influences on the situation? Going back to the Italian experience, to those days 3 or 4 weeks ago, what do you think was made the greater influence on the situation?
Well, what we can tell you is that there are about 2 weeks between the moment in which you get the virus, the period of so-called incubation, and the moment in which you become ill. And we have empirical evidence that in those days in which some people have been going out, then there was a peak, an increase in the spreading of the virus, in contagion. So it's really important because you don't feel it at the moment when you do it, but you see the results. Let's say you pay the bill in terms of human lives a couple of weeks later. And this is something also that we have seen in other countries. So, for instance, in Spain, the first part of Spain which was infected was Madrid, the capital city. And at that moment, when they were about to declare that Madrid will be declared red zone, so locked out of the rest of the country, then many people from Madrid moved to the eastern coast of Spain. And 2 weeks later, the contagion popped up in that part of Spain. So it's really, really important to avoid social gatherings. Any social gathering increases the exposure. Any people can be infecting 10 or 15 people if you meet them at the park, if you meet them at the barbecue, if you share a glass of vodka with them. So that is something which is exposing. And it can be exposing with your brother, if you do it with your mother, it can do with your neighbor. It could be always around. So that is really what is really, really bad. This is why we have learned that we have to be resilient and we have to be isolated because we can all die. That is, really what is frightening. And I don't want to frighten Russian people, but I just want to say that this is really what's going to be effective. This is why even most of the Italians are abiding by the rules, which is quite unusual because Italians are all very creative and they all want to, to discuss about, they're perhaps not the most disciplined people in Europe, but they're really abiding by the rule, most people. There are some exceptions, but 60 million people, then there can be some exceptions.
Of course. So it's not a fairy tale, actually. That's what we are discussing right now. Okay.
Oh, if we are getting closer to the legal aspects, can you tell us, please, what do you think about all the new restrictions introduced? And I think it is important to realize, in your opinion, would they remain after the end of the quarantine? Maybe there are some fundamental changes in the rights of European Union citizens.
Let's differentiate between the national level and the European level. Now, at the national level, we understand that there will be at some moment a release of those measures, so the restriction will be waived. We know that they will be waived, but we do not know exactly when. Maybe that can be at the beginning of May, and considering that we have been already under lockdown for 3 weeks, that brings it up to two months. This has been done because the Italian government puts human lives on top. So that's the most important thing. But you see that in other European countries, they are not being as strict. So we do not know what will happen in the UK. We do not know what will happen in Sweden, in the Netherlands. We actually have no idea of how bad the situation will be in the US. Now the US has many more people infected than Italy, and it's just been picking up dramatically. In the European Union, there is one problem. The problem is that Italy is much, ahead in the contagion, and then other countries are like 3-4 weeks behind. So it's quite sure that there will be restrictions of movement at a certain moment because some countries will be out of the pandemics and some others will be in the peak of the pandemic. So they don't want to, we don't, actually I should say we will not be wanting to re-import cases of COVID-19 at the time in which things are slowing down. That's pretty much the situation that now China is introducing. There is a big debate, Yaroslav, about data protection, because South Korea has been very intrusive in the personal life of everybody, checking where people have been. So in other words, the mobile phone, then you could be traced on where you go. So people are not really wanting to do this in the European Union. And of course, with a mobile phone, if the mobile phone can track you where you are, then the authorities can really see if you are in isolation or not. So that is something which I don't think, data protection will be abandoned, so will be waived. So this will not be possible in the European Union. But as I said, free movement, there will be restrictions.
So, you've just touched upon the hottest topic in Russia, because our government is going to introduce the same measures as South Korea, and so far. And the main difference, I believe, between European Union countries and Russia is that in terms of mentality, maybe of the people, of locals, the main difference is that there is less trust in legislation here than in European Union. We're not sure that it would be abandoned. Why are you so sure?
Waiving data protection, it's extremely difficult, also from a legislative perspective, because the data protection is data are protected at the European level. And to waive that, we will need some major changes which will be highly unpopular, and they would have to be decided by all countries. And this is what makes me sure, because this is a matter that we don't legislate at the national level. So there would need to be consensus by all countries, and right now it seems unlikely. It's also because not all countries have been behaving according to the same standard. I think you can see that in Sweden, people are just freely walking in the streets, and in other countries there is a lockdown. So I don't think that data protection can be easily waived, also from a legal perspective. So this is what makes me so sure, Alessandra.
So this time, European Union shield actually is helping, right?
In that case, yeah.
I'm extremely sorry. May I ask you one more question regarding the measures, especially regarding the role of the European Union restrictions, local authorities and federal government in Italy? We're not so familiar with federal structure of the country, but nonetheless, we understand that you've got provinces and you've got federal government, right?
Yeah. So let's say that we have in Europe, in most countries, we have the supranational level, which we call EU, European Union. Then we got what we call the national level, which is equivalent to the Russian federal level. And then we've got further levels, lower levels, which can be, in the different countries, they have different names. And then you have additional levels further down. Now, in terms of, deploying the restrictions, all the restrictions have been introduced at the level, the national level, which in Russia would be the federal level. So the level of let's say, the equivalent of the Russian Federation. All the restrictions are handled by each country of the European Union. The European Union has only introduced some limits in respect of some flights and some activities or some, sanity checks, health checks, free movement of persons is currently not restricted. So you can still go from one country to the other. You may be asked a passport control, and then they may check you if you have fever, but it's not completely, eliminated right now. At the local level, there have been some restrictions because some areas feel that there is an immediate threat. So at the local level, there can be the local governors which can declare some areas as, red zones, as we call them. So in other words, seclude them from the rest. So for instance, if we have, an extreme increase in cases in, let's say, 2-3 villages, then they can lock them down. So not only people are not allowed to go out of their home, but they also not allowed to go out of their village. So for no reason, there can be no reason why they can leave that area. Whereas normally you're allowed to, for instance, if you are a worker, then you're allowed to go and work. If you are in the food industry and you are obliged to work because otherwise, you will interrupt the food supply chain. But when you are in those very special secluded zones, you're simply not allowed. They're like prohibited cities, completely locked. So that's pretty much how the restrictions work.
Now, let us ask you about tax measures in Italy. What major measures are implemented in terms of finance, taxes? Are they differentiated by industries and proceeds, monthly income, or by any other criterion?
Yeah, what a pleasure. Our topic, taxation. So, yes, let me make a difference between what we call public finance and tax, because we have been seeing, and here I talk about the experience of Italy specific, but Italy is pretty much at the forefront of the crisis. So we have been seeing also the potential effect. So it can be interesting as a case study if you wish. In the case of public finance, we have been seeing measures more for individuals, whereas in the case of tax measures are especially for business and SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And then we also use in Italy taxes to help individuals indirectly, because the government is making small cash vouchers available to individuals who need, because they have lost their jobs, and there are people who have been losing their jobs, or because of the shutdown, there are only some jobs which can go on. This is the so-called essential jobs, and essential jobs are pretty much related to food, to all other, which is strictly indispensable, and we normally call we normally say pharmacy, hospitals, nurses, all this kind of jobs. And but many, most of the other jobs are shut down. So most of the other, works are shut down. So basically, many people have lost their jobs. So many people don't have money because they're not getting salaries. They're not being paid. And so in these cases, there are people who have become jobless, so they are receiving, on the one hand, some cash subsidies or vouchers, as we call them, for temporary unemployment. So we have temporary unemployment subsidies, which are made available to all employees. I must say it's fairly easy to get them. They're not large, but at least you can buy some food in case you don't have any reserves. And then, as I said, for business, then we normally act at the tax level. So at the tax level, I would say that I would make 3 blocks of measures. One is what we call the deferrals. Deferrals in terms of months, basically until beginning or end of June 2020, deferred collection of taxes, deferred submission of returns, deferred notification of tax notices. You know, Alexandra, it's pretty much like as if this time we're frozen. Italy, anything is frozen. So, you know, court cases, frozen. It basically, everything is postponed, everything is deferred. And, you know, it's also interesting to say that at this moment, you know the mechanism of withholding taxes. So when you make a payment and you are a withholding agent, you are obliged to levy, you know, the tax, to withhold the tax. Mm-hmm. Now, at this moment, they have waived the obligation to withhold tax. That basically means... Oh, really? Yeah, that's what they have done. And, you know, one more point, I think we should, you know, we should also consider that this is affecting, because at the end of the day, we want more money to go to the people who have actually, you know, earned it. Because, you know, less people are earning money, so this is not the time to pay taxes. That's pretty much the message. And leaving aside the fact that there have been amazing losses on the stock exchanges, but I think this is nothing new. You must have followed that from Russia too. Then we have something else when we talk about the use of taxes for indirect subsidies, and we call this mechanism tax credits. So the tax credits, if, for instance, let's say, somebody has to keep a supermarket open, then all the amount of money that you pay for what we call sanitizing, so, you know, special cleaning and other things which can be more expensive, then you get a tax credit for that. So you can, you know, you can actually credit it off, the taxes that you have to pay. And the same story applies if you have to, let me make another example. If you have, you know, you are the owner of a restaurant and your restaurant must shut down because it's not essential. Of course, we protect food, but not at restaurants. But you have a rental. So if you have a rental, you can get a credit against taxes for the rental. You pay the rental, but then you reduce the amount of taxes that you pay by this. And bear in mind that we also allow this for VAT, because we don't think that many people will have profits. Of course. Unfortunately, sorry, I shouldn't laugh about this, but not many people will have profits, but at the end of the day, there will be VAT. So if you can use this across the different taxes, that's not bad.
So do you mean that you can credit the tax amount, not tax base? Not the base that is taxable. The tax amount, you can write off a sum that you are going to use paying the rent, right?
Yeah, there are 2 different ways. One is that you can deduct, in the specific case of the rent, that's a deduction from the taxable base. But in other cases, then it's a deduction from tax. But the one way or the other, if you reduce the taxable base, then, you know, you also get an advantage. And the fact that also we have VAT deferrals, that, you know, the payment of VAT, you know, for small and medium enterprises and for professionals, then the deferral of VAT is also something quite important. And then we've got tax deductions for COVID-19 related donations. So that is also important because, you know, there are many, you know, maybe you have heard that big Italian companies like Armani or others have been making very large donations. So the COVID-19 related donations are deductible for tax purposes. So that gives you an idea of the fact that you know, we're trying to bring as much cash as possible into the economy, because it's a moment in which there is a basic stagnation. And this is the real secret. But of course, you know, Italy, it's a country that cannot afford. This crisis is is unprecedented, as I said. It's unprecedented. And so we're just trying to do our best. But that's pretty much to give you an idea of what the tax and public finance measures are about. I don't know if you have some more questions, Alexandra.
May I specify something? When we're talking about tax credit, does it mean that you will be... So it works temporarily, or...
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to pay it later on?
You're going to pay it later on, Alexandra. But the point is, let me make an example. If you have, to pay a withholding tax, and then there is no levying right now, and then you will have other losses, then at the end of the day, the fact that you can offset one against the other, it's still something positive, because at least it reduces the amount of tax that you have to pay at this moment. And plus, paying taxes later is still an advantage. Because if you have losses, then you will have the possibility to offset some of them.
And these measures are being introduced on the federal level, right?
Yes.
There is no local taxes that are postponed or deferred.
Well, local taxes have been suspended for the time being, so the collection has been suspended. But in Italy, local taxation, it's pretty much limited. It's mostly on immovable property, so it's a net wealth tax, or what is really heavy in Italy is at the federal level, so at the level of the state.
In Russia,
when I say state, I mean the entire country.
And have your government introduced something that actually leads to increasing taxes?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this would be extremely unpopular. And it's also the way in which you increase it. Increase it on what? People are not earning salaries, so you would have to do it on VAT, and that will be there will be a riot.
In Russia, for example, we've got several measures leading to increase of taxes in this package, COVID package, so to say. For example, bank deposits, interest on bank deposits were exempt from taxation, and now they're introducing 13% on this income for citizens.
But Alexandra, maybe the Russian government has more leeway there. If I understand correctly from your words, you said that they were exempted. So,
right.
In Italy, there is no such situation right now, and therefore, that is something which there is less leeway. So if something was exempted, then of course, formally you are increasing it, you're right. But at the same time, you are pretty much removing an exemption. So it's you had some leeway to do this because there was an exemption. So you have simply removed an exemption. So I understand that is an increase, but that is also not that bad, because it's a matter of fairness, one can say, because most income should be taxed, and if you don't tax income and you exempt it, then you can also have the possibility to remove this exemption in times of difficulty. But no increase in Italy, no increase of tax.
It's common knowledge that in Russia and even in Italy, shadow economy still plays an important role when it comes to the real earnings. Could you please comment in the following assumption? In this situation, it seems more efficient to simplify tax system, making easier computation of taxes, cut the number of taxes, etc., in order to stimulate people get from shadow schemes to the official world.
In Italy, there is quite a developed shadow economy, and we do not know how large it is. And there are different fields. We perceive that there is a shadow economy also because there are a number of people who are basically now showing that they are not earning any income at all, and they are in a difficult situation. I think that this is an opportunity to do something about the sharing economy, and perhaps, what I would suggest as an advice could be that there could be some additional benefits to the extent that an employer can sort of settle some of the positions of people who were formerly in the shadow economy. So in other words, giving some incentive, not just by simplifying the system, which is a very good idea, but also giving incentives to those who basically indicate that there have been some people working for them in the past. You don't make them paying penalties, and you sort of look ahead and give them some incentives, at the end of the day, at this moment, these can be, those people in the shadow economy, those workers in the shadow economy are people who anyway may be starving, because after a few days that, after a few weeks that you don't earn income, you need to get some cash, you need to buy food. So that can perhaps be an opportunity to do something about the tax system, also with simplifications, but with some kind of measures to let the shadow economy come out.
Guten Tags.
Let's start with the general problems in international taxation.
So I think that right at this moment, from the perspective of international taxation, we have a big problem with losses. And we have a big problem with losses all across the world. So we normally care about profits and minimizing the taxes on profits, but this is a time of losses, unfortunately. So I would say that at the level of international taxation, we should be concerned with the treatment of losses, and we should be concerned with the fact that if money is not available, then this can be something that can create problems across the borders. So I think that there should be some possible coordination among the countries, because this is a global problem, and we should not forget that we have a global economy. The economy is globalized, and from this perspective, we should also understand that if we make good conditions for international investment, then there could be great opportunities. Alexandra, you were after World War II in communist time, but after World War II in Western Europe, there was a significant economic development just because there was a tremendous need to recover from the tremendous crisis of World War II. So there were, infrastructures and other things, so people really made money. So if I put it like that, it's a moment for opportunities once the crisis comes to an end, so it would be good if there were some kind of coordinated approach. Of course, I don't think that countries should be deprived of the right to have their own policy. So maybe if you have some specific question also on what Russia is doing from the international taxation perspective, then I will be happy to answer.
Then we would like to have your opinion on the following matter. Our government is determined to cancel any international arrangements which result in decreased tax rate on interest and dividends, whatever it takes, including termination of the particular double tax treaty. What do you think about this line of actions, which is for some reason in Russia attributed to so-called anti-coronavirus supporting measures? Thank you.
Alexandra, of course, your Prime Minister has a very specific technical knowledge in tax matters. I mean, Michael Mishustin is a person of experience, but let's try to see what this can be. And let me make it very clear that each country and each government has the right to determine what is good for its country and what approach its country wants to take. But let's say, I must say I have heard through social media about the fact that Russia wants to terminate treaties or to terminate the current regime for taxation of cross-border interest and dividends, and that basically will increase the right of Russia as the source country to levy withholding taxes without the restrictions established by the treaties. Number one, Russia is a sovereign country. Russia can terminate its treaty when it wants. But if it terminates its treaties, the consequences will potentially be that there will be, less payment of dividends, and maybe this is what the government is trying to have, and basically that means that, profits will stay in Russia and will not be distributed to foreign companies in the form of dividends, and on the other hand, also when you have payments from the other country to Russia, that same will apply. So if you have a Russian multinational enterprise based in Russia, then there will be a disincentive to pay dividends because of the fact that the treaty has been terminated. If Russia terminates the treaty, it will get some benefits on dividends sourced in Russia, but it will also lose some revenue because the companies will not make distributions of dividend to Russia because the source country, the other country, will be able to tax that fully. So it's really important that this measure one has to make a sort of quantitative assessment of the pluses and minuses. And I think, that is really essential. Otherwise, it's something which could be, interesting, could show interesting, but it's not very productive. Plus, with interest, if I understand correctly that also this is about, consequences on interest, if you have, no treaty regime for interest outbound payments of interest, that basically means that, lending money to Russia will become more difficult, and then at the end of the day, this could perhaps, one should wonder whether this could create a crisis of liquidity in Russia, or whether Russia has enough money. So I do not know whether this answers your question.
Yes, of course. We also actually apprehend that it looks like apprehend less interest of international investors in Russia, of course. Because, yes, we still don't know what treaties has in mind, but nonetheless, so far they came to Cyprus, as we heard, they came to Cyprus with this innovative suggestion. We don't know how it will be going on later, but nonetheless, what do you think? Could it affect at the same time, could it affect our international cooperation in terms of tax avoidance, in terms of exchange of information, if Russia unilaterally will terminate tax treaties?
Well, the point is that on top of the bilateral treaties, you also have the multilateral convention. Russia is a signatory state on the multilateral convention on mutual assistance. So I think that maybe the Russian government has also considered that it can terminate the bilateral treaties without giving up mutual assistance, because it can still get mutual assistance by reference to the multilateral OECD Council of Europe Convention. So I think, that terminating a bilateral treaty can have also as a consequence that you no longer exchange information, but there could be alternative ways to exchange information. So I would say that tax authorities would still get information. But the point is, if you only terminate one or two treaties, that can perhaps create some tensions in the relations with some countries. So if Russia only terminates, say, the treaty with Cyprus, then that will potentially create frictions. Now, you can say that if the Russian government wants to terminate the treaty with Cyprus, it can do so, and it could perhaps not care about the implications. But still, I think that if it has a policy of terminating the treaties, then, there should be a consistent policy, not just with one country. If you terminate it just with one country, there must be a reason. And if there is a reason, this reason should be clear enough. Otherwise, it will perhaps not be a good idea and could create international tensions.
Especially these days.
Yeah.
Not what we're looking for. And do you think after this crisis or during this crisis, in our international cooperation will change focus? So far, we were focusing on tax avoidance, on the BEPS plan. And what's going to happen in 6 months? What do you think?
Alexandra, it's really difficult to predict what may happen in 6 months. My impression is that there will be more consideration for things other than, let's say, BEPS, so base erosion and profit shifting, so tax avoidance and de-offshorization. And there will be also consideration for the non-tax goals, so the revenue, in English we call them regulatory goals of taxes. So that, there could be some situation in which there are some, there should be some ways of using taxes also for, overcoming some problems, some emergencies in some countries. So I think that this is something which has not been having an international dimension right now, but this may happen in the future. So discovering a world beyond tax avoidance, discovering a world beyond, global value chains, and taking into account that, there could be across the borders some additional new problems that we have to take into account.
And by the way, it's interesting to understand, is it OECD, when we're talking about OECD committees and OECD projects, are they under lockdown right now or not? Because it's an international organization.
Yeah, what I understand, Alexandra, is that they have been working until, let's say, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, let's say until the 10th, 11th, pretty much. And then from the information that I have, there have been no longer meetings. And this is something which has been put on hold just because governments don't want people to travel. They cannot assemble. They cannot go in the different parts of the world. So if they're working remotely. So if they're having meetings, they're having meetings remotely. But, the usual meetings in Paris have been put on hold. But this also, I should also mention that from the perspective of the OECD, we normally talk about what is being done for the digital economy, what is being done for BEPS, but the OECD is also working a lot on cooperation among tax authorities. And I have seen that there has been a release by the Forum on Tax Administration on the 26th of March. And there has been, they are increasing the cooperation on the type of measures that each country is taking to face the COVID-19 crisis. I think,
within European Union or even the
OECD, the so-called Forum on Tax Administration. The European Union is certainly discussing this, but the OECD itself, the Forum on Tax Administration, so tax authorities within the OECD, they are sharing information concerning the type of measures that are being taken in the different countries, let's say to ease the burdens on taxpayers and also to help business and individuals who have cash flow problems, just to try and overcome this crisis. This is interesting because it's new. We hadn't seen it before. So that is something, I saw a report from the 26th of March 2020, so last week.
We'll search it, yes, look it up, definitely. And by the way, again, international organization is working this time again and helping to improve your measures, so to say, because looking at the measures that are being taken within the European Union, we may say that they are more or less the same. They are more or less focused on deferral of taxes, more or less focused on canceling taxes and helping people with some difference in some countries. But nonetheless, I think it's also says something about or proves that information is being circulated within the European Union, and you are adopting experience of other countries, right?
Yeah, best practices.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you actually for those greetings to our medical assistants and those greetings to our medical health system who decided to deploy their team in Italy, and we
have really appreciated that.
And we hope that we will be of use, actually. And just to recap, getting to the end of our interview, just to recap, what would be your prognosis, your forecast of the future problems in Europe in terms of tax system? And
I would say that the biggest problem to come, Alexandra, is unemployment. There will be, enormous losses, enormous unemployment. And, because, tomorrow we can perhaps become free to go in the streets again, but people will change their behavior. So there will be less people going to the restaurant, less people making parties, less people doing things which are normal. Think about the airlines. The airlines will possibly all go bankrupt. So there is an enormous need for reactivating the economy. This is something, as I said, only at the end of World War II, this is something that we needed to do, and it took several years. So it's now important to, if I can use this word, pump up money into the economy, because otherwise, there will be, loss of growth for years and years. But if we do the right things, then there can be a boost for recovery and for good investment. and just to create development. So this is how I see. It is as if we had gone in just a few weeks back to the period of the end of World War II and just reconstructing the world.
And what do you think about, speaking about pumping up money, what do you think, how important would be the role of private investors and private charities in this case? Bearing in mind, for example, Israel, because they received a lot of help from abroad, from charity funds and private persons, Jewish private persons, who actually built like 25% of the economy at the start, allowing people to go further. What do you think about private?
If we create trust, and if people trust to make investment, and that capital is brought into the economy, that creates growth. So I think that in the case of, let's say, donations from charities, if that money is pumped up into the economy, that money creates growth. So it is very good to give some special incentives at the beginning so that we make that money, we make those charities or we make those investors interested in putting their money available to the economy, because that money will create growth. And it's an exceptional circumstance, but at exceptional moments, there should be exceptional measures. Just to say it like Mario Draghi, whatever it takes. So it's less important to collect high taxes. It's more important to put money in the economy. And private money should be somehow, stimulated to get into the economy. Otherwise, they will keep it in the banks. And it's not, keeping it in the bank, or otherwise, maybe it's not the right thing to do. When we want to have growth, we have to see the money available, and the money must circulate and create growth. So I see it very favorably, and I would say that, there should be incentives for donations, and as I said, Italy has introduced some of them, but I think this is the right way forward. States give up their right to tax something. In exchange, people make investment and make a lot of money, put a lot of money in the economy.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it was our pleasure.
Guten Tags.
Summing up our discussion, we would like to sincerely thank Mr. Pаскуале Пистоне for his participation, for his words of gratitude to our country, to express words of support to him and all Italians, and to wish them health and well-being. We all hope that the pandemic will end in the near future and people will return to normal life. Summarizing the legal aspects that Mr. Pаскуале mentioned, we would like to draw attention to several of them. Regarding the unilateral change of the double tax treaty, Professor Pаскуале expressed, as we think, a very important idea.
This measure may help to collect some additional taxes in the short term. However, in the long term, the country will lose the inflow of foreign investment due to their unprofitability. After all, in addition to the tax at source of revenue, foreign companies will have to pay taxes in their own country.
And these investments can be crucial for economic recovery after the severe impact of the pandemic. We would also like to express our hope that the Russian authorities will carefully analyze the measures of assistance provided to citizens, the economy and businesses in other countries, including Italy, and will think about introducing similar measures in Russia.
As we know from Professor Pаскуале Pistone, in Italy, companies are exempt from paying most taxes. The state seeks to encourage the payment of wage to employees, allowing them not to withhold income tax. And such measures apply to the most companies in the country.
We should also draw your attention to the conclusion that Professor Pаскуале made. The most terrible problem to the world economy is about to face after the pandemic is unemployment. Millions of jobs that could be lost if many companies be going bankrupt as a result of the outbreak will have a huge impact on the economy. Therefore, the main activity of the authorities in the field of economy should be the preservation of current jobs. Investing in this goal will definitely bring multiple profits later. At this point, we would like to say goodbye and wish our followers health and patience. Stay at home, take care of your families, and help each other. Good luck to all of us.
Guten Tags. О налогах человеческим языком.